So
now it's official.
it's official. Okay, so now we have to be good.
Yes. Well, we're going to get going. My name is Heather Riggs. I'm with the New England Museum Association. Welcome to our June Lunch with NEMA. As I mentioned before, I hope everybody is staying cool today. It is a little bit sweltery out there. Before we start, I would like to turn it over to Scarlett for our land acknowledgement.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us at the lunch hour. Virtual spaces cannot replace the lands that sustain and empower us. I'm at home in Worcester, Massachusetts, homelands of the Nipmuc Nation people and their allied tribes, past and present. NEMA recognizes that our organization and those of our members were founded within a colonizing society, which continues the exclusions and erasures of many Indigenous peoples in New England and beyond. You can use the Indigenous Peoples land map to locate the lands where you're zooming in from or where your museum is located. I'll drop that in the chat. And thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Scarlett, for that one. As you may have heard earlier, today's session is being recorded and will be available on the NEMA website later on this afternoon. So if you just head over to the NEMA website and go to our calendar of events, you will see the link to that, along with a bunch of other session recordings that we have made available to people to share. So before we get going, I just want to say thank you to our panel today. I'm really looking forward to having our tour with the Frederic Remington Museum. This is a first for us and stuff like that. So I'm going to turn it over to Ernesto to introduce the panel and to kick us off. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Heather. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another lunch with NEMA. I'm Ernesto Mendoza, exhibit graphic designer and owner of One by Design and co-chair of the NEMA Independent Museum Professional PAG. Say that 3 times. Today, we will be taking a tour of a new exhibit at the Frederic Remington Art Museum in Augustenburg, New York, called Beauty and Strength, a retrospective of a little known but a very influential American female artist named Sally James Farnham. Joining me today is exhibit designer Jakub Janiga from Janiga Design, who luckily for me, hired me for this wonderful project, and our client Laura Desmond, the curator and educator at the museum, who will provide us with a lovely tour of the new exhibit. After our tour, we'll answer all your questions. So go ahead and put them on the Q&A section of your screen, or you could put them in the chat as well. We would be happy to stay a little after if we run long. So Laura, take it to you. So why don't you give us a little background on how and why the project started?
Right. Why does a museum focused on Frederic Remington feature a permanent exhibit on Sally James Farnham? Part of the answer is that Farnham and Remington are significantly connected in a number of ways. They were friends and colleagues. When Farnham first started sculpting, she turned to Remington for critique and advice. There's an important local connection. They're both from here and maintain close ties to the area throughout their lives. Beyond the many things that Farnham and Remington shared, like their love of horses and riding, the fact that their fathers were Civil War officers, and their North Country roots, both were largely self-taught as artists. For all of his imitators, Remington didn't really have students, and Farnham really stands out as a budding artist whom he encouraged and advised. So she's an important part of his legacy in that way. And after Remington's untimely death at the age of 48, his widow Eva entrusted Farnham with the important work of overseeing the production of his final 2 completed sculptures, the large-size Bronco Buster and Stampede. But you could also say that the seeds for this project were sown way back at the founding of the museum in 1923, when Sally James Farnham became the first recorded donor to the fledgling museum, giving her patented plaster casts of her portraits of President Warren G. Harding and Marshal Ferdinand Foch. And over the decades, her family continued this generous tradition, donating a number of significant works by Farnham to the museum, donations that were added to by thoughtful purchases by the museum in the early 2000s, and some additional gifts from Michael Reed, the researcher behind the Farnham Catalog Resonate project. And so by that time, the museum had the largest public collection of Farnham's work. And it was then that the museum published a book on Farnham by Peter Hasrick and began to formulate plans for a permanent exhibition, one that would give this important 20th century sculptor the showcase that she so richly deserves. Such an exhibit would also enable the museum to move forward an important objective of our strategic plan to raise the quality of our other exhibits to the level of excellence in our Newell galleries where the Remington art is shown. So the project received funding in 2017 with a generous gift from the Robert F. and Eleonora McCabe Foundation. Then it became a matter of finding the right designer for the exhibit. And this happened at last in 2019 when we were connected to Jakub, who it turns out was the perfect match. And truly, we couldn't be happier with the exhibition, which accomplishes everything that we'd hoped it would and more. So I'll turn things over to Jakub now so that he can pick up the story of the exhibit design.
Thank you, Laura. Just wanted to quickly introduce myself briefly. I'm Jakub Janiga, the founder and creative director of Janiga Design, exhibit design studio in Boston. We work on a wide range of exhibit projects from cultural history, military history, art, nature center, zoos, corporate and academic environments, and more. Yeah, I got connected with the museum through Laura Roberts that worked with the museum previously, and she mentioned to me that, you know, they're planning this exhibit. And another interesting connection was that my family has a little camp, little cottage up in northern New York, which is about 45 minutes away from the Remington Museum. So this really became very convenient, sort of a spot for me to use and work and come to meetings with with Laura and the director of the museum at the time. So this lovely connection, because we had this place for some time, and so I was excited to be able to get involved. So I'll share a few pages from our design package. We went through sort of a typical design process stages, such as concept design, schematic design, and design development. We started off with bubble diagrams, sort of determining the configuration of the exhibit space. You know, we work with a total of 8 areas that you can see highlighted in different colors here. Each area, we went through from the plans to elevations and figure out, you know, how we bring this together. So each of these areas sort of consists of area panel, which carries the introduction to the area. In some cases, we introduced wall murals that were sort of visual extension of the area panels and brought everything sort of together. And then we worked with very wide range of sculptures by Farnham. So we placed some of these sculptures in freestanding display cases. Some were mounted to the walls, and in some cases they were these sculpture pieces in vitrines were mounted directly to the area panels. So we got the interesting dimensionality there. We also took advantage of the 3 large windows in the area where we placed window scrims with images of Farnham from different parts of her life that you will see later in the images. Sort of brought everything together. We used took advantage of many different surfaces in that, relatively small space. We also created these schematic design renderings that help the client to understand also the spatial relations in between the areas and the freestanding units, elements. And we, as you can see here, we also play with color palettes. So we ended up using color coding. And so each area got its own its own color. And I think this would be maybe a good sequence to bring in Ernest. I'm sorry, I forgot there's a couple detailed pages. So this is just an example of detailed drawing of one of those wall-mounted cases that was displaying some medals, some book, and then these are layouts. We laid out, obviously, each of the sculptures into these displays. These are the freestanding displays. This is kind of the process we gone through. And here's the sort of a page where Ernesto can step in. But before that, I would love to say that Ernesto, I was so happy to bring Ernesto in, and he just became really significant. His graphics became significant sort of portion or driving force behind, visual driving force behind these exhibits. And I couldn't be happier with his approach and final designs.
Thanks, Jakub.
Yeah, thanks, Ernesto.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you your $20 later.
Yes.
Yeah, so essentially, this is a page where I just basically show fonts and colors. So taking Jakub's color palette, beautiful color palette, which I thought was really appropriate for the space, and really just trying to come up with the same type of values and hues. And with respect to the fonts, I wanted to create a balance of classical looking fonts, but with a touch of contemporary, just to keep it fresh, but also timeless. So if you could just change to the next slide, Jakub. So these are primary panels. Pretty much, what I wanted to do is really implement those colors, that color palette all together, and really try to make some sense of it. So the slides really show the primary level panels here. Each one of these panels were used as an introduction to each section. After studying Sally's pieces, I really wanted to emphasize not only the emotion that her pieces evoke, but to show the visitor details that one may overlook, like how the light would capture the creases in a dress, the graceful curves of a woman's hips, the strength of a man's hands holding a delicate hat, or the juxtaposition of a bent wrist on an upturned face. To me, this is the power of how graphics can be used as a telephoto lens versus a simpler type of graphic where it really just carries text and photographs. So I thought this was a good solution for really bringing out Sally's work, first name basis, Sally and I. So these panels also integrate with some of the murals that you'll see during Laura's tour. So, without further ado, I'll hand it over to Laura to walk through the space. Off to you, Laura, thanks.
Okay. Let me pull this up. And I just want to situate us briefly. So the Frederic Remington Art Museum is located in Ogdensburg, New York on the St. Lawrence River. We are just across from Prescott, Ontario, which I can see out my window. After Frederic Remington's death, his widow Eva lived in the mansion seen here, which was the first building for the museum. And Sally James Farnham's childhood home was just a few blocks away from here. And beginning this past fall, visitors to the Remington Museum who walk through the front door are met immediately by the fellow to the left of the stairs, the soldier, who is part of Farnham's monument, the Spirit of Liberty, a soldiers and sailors Civil War monument located in Library Park directly across the street from the museum here in Ogdensburg. Farnham's design was selected from among 16 submitted for the project and was unveiled in 1905. So after several acts of vandalism, the soldier was removed to storage for his own safety, but he is now once more accessible to the public here in the museum's lobby, where an interpretive panel, seen here on the right of the screen, provides context for the soldier. In addition to linking the soldier to both the monument across the street and the Farnham exhibition upstairs in the museum, the panel also connects Farnham with Remington, noting that she corresponded with him about historically accurate clothing, gear, and accessories for the soldier. The photo that you see was taken at the time of the monument's dedication in 1905 and shows Farnham standing beside the monument. So now I would like to share a brief video because I wish that I could be broadcasting to you from the Farnham Gallery, but we've got some internet issues in that gallery. So I will be, for the rest of today's conversation, leading you through the exhibit using slides, but I wanted to share here a brief video walkthrough to give you a sense of the space. So here we go.
Good job so far, Laura. You haven't bumped into a case. Gotta love those pen holders. I think that's one of the things that eventually will go away and I'll miss.
Right. Oops. You should. Lost my spot here. Okay. Oops. Not sure.
We must be in the closet right now.
There we go. All right. So backing up, you saw this introductory panel as you arrive on the museum's second floor. We've got this large panel on the hallway wall introducing the exhibit within. featuring a striking photo of Farnham clad in bloomers and an artist's smock beside her model for the soldier. The introductory panel hanging here connects to the completed bronze soldier in the lobby and introduces visitors to Farnham and the exhibit within. We hoped with our choice of image and text to convey Farnham's lively personality and her consummate artistry, and to gesture toward the aspirations of the exhibition, namely to bring back into public awareness an important artist who was exceptionally well known in the first half of the 20th century, but who fell into obscurity in the second half. With the door through which we enter the exhibit framed here, I'll just provide a few bits of background information about Farnham before we walk through the exhibit. She was born in 1869, 8 years after Frederic Remington. She was the younger of two daughters born to Colonel Edward C. and Sarah Wells Perkins James. Her mother died when she was 10, after which she kept house for her father. She spent much of her childhood here in Ogdensburg, but also traveled with her father and lived also at their other home in Manhattan. As a young person, she was known as a dashing horsewoman and leader of the younger set in Ogdensburg. At age 27, she married Paulding Farnham, the renowned designer for Tiffany and Company. She was self-taught as an artist, beginning her work almost accidentally, playing with plasticine while recovering in the hospital from an illness at age 32. She moved in the elite social, intellectual, and artistic circles of her day, including that of the Algonquin Round Table. Despite the dissolution of her marriage, which culminated in a divorce when she was 45, she managed as a single mother of 3 children to develop an outstanding career, often besting her male counterparts in the winning of major commissions. She was a savvy business person, but also philanthropic, generously donating her work for a number of socially minded projects. And even in periods of great personal and economic difficulty, she maintained an optimistic can-do attitude, a sort of joie de vivre that enabled her to continue doing the work that she loved while supporting herself and her family. So the first thematic panel encountered upon entering the exhibit situates Farnham in her hometown of Ogdensburg, New York. And Ernesto sort of already highlighted the wonderful concept of using the blown up photo details as a panel backdrop while including the full photo in the panel. But this is the only area panel in the exhibition that doesn't feature one of Farnham's artwork, but instead uses an image of the beautiful gardens that were attached to her home when she was growing up here in Ogdensburg. The home would later belong to Farnham's sister and brother-in-law, Lucia and Grant C. Medill, who were important community leaders in the area. And throughout her life, Farnham remained close with family and friends in Ogdensburg, and her children were likewise close with their Medill cousins here. And the Medills and their descendants donated a number of important Farnham works to the museum, including this one. So each of the thematic exhibit areas features related artwork by Farnham. In this case, her 1931 portrait of her sister's grandchildren, Mary Kate, Chris, and Emily, with their dog Shep. Farnham sculpted numerous portraits of her friends and family over the course of her life. The next panel you'd encounter as you view the exhibit is entitled Ogdensburg's Other Great Sculptor, exploring the relationship between Farnham and Frederic Remington. As I mentioned earlier, Farnham and Remington were friends and colleagues, and it was to him that she went for critique of her first formal sculptural work, Spanish Dancer, an image of which is featured here on this panel. In addition to an image of Spanish dancer, the panel also includes a letter from Remington to Farnham in which he requests an image of her monumental sculpture, Defenders of the Flag, which he had seen at the Roman Bronze Works Foundry during a visit there to inspect his own work. The two both had their sculptures cast at this important and excellent foundry. Here you can see the panel as it exists in the display and the related artwork, Farnham's 1905 equestrian sculpture, Cowboy Fun. This sculpture belonged to the Remingtons and was included in Eva Remington's 1918 bequest that forms the heart of the collection on display at the museum today. It's unknown whether Remington purchased the sculpture from Farnham or if she gave it to him in gratitude for his encouragement and guidance. While the style is all Farnham's, the subject matter can be seen as a tribute to Remington. Above Cowboy Fun, you can see a quote, "She's ugly as sin, but full of ginger. Keep it up, Sally," which was reported to be Remington's response to her first formal sculptural effort, Spanish Dancer, when she took it to him for critique. And here you see the transition from Ogdensburg's other great sculptor to the next section of the exhibit, Never by Any Chance a Sculptress, which presents Farnham's exploration of themes of female strength, independence, and bodily freedom. The panel features an image of Farnham's 1921 bronze sculpture, Feather Dancer. The dancer Irene Castle posed for the sculpture, and the freedom of the female body in dance was a recurring theme in Farnham's work. Ernesto, I know you wanted to share something about this exhibit area. You're muted.
Sorry, I just wanted to interject a side note about design here. This is a good example of integrating the cases within the primary panel. We really wanted to avoid having a lot of these little skinny pedestals on the floor. Not only does it save floor space, but we thought that it would be a good solution to put it onto the panels themselves. And it sort of adds a little bit more robust feeling to the primary panels themselves.
Cool. Thanks. So yeah, the work featured in that panel mounted vitrine is an exceptionally early Farnham sculpture, Pegasus, a work that had great personal significance to Farnham and her children, and which is dated to 1901, the year in which Farnham took up sculpting. The panel presents also an image of Farnham's cave woman on the right, response to Remington's Paleolithic man on the left. And her sculpture is in conversation as well with the famous Emmanuel Fremier sculpture, Gorilla Carrying Off a Woman. Farnham's stunning 1918 sculpture, Joan of Arc, is also included in this section of the exhibit. Although her Joan is indeed armored like a soldier, Farnham chose to emphasize too Joan's spiritual force as she casts her gaze heavenward. Her placement beside the huge war horse lends her the power of the horse, even as it emphasizes her diminutive feminine figure. It's probable that Farnham created the sculpture as a submission for a competition for a heroic monument to be placed on Riverside Drive in New York City. The competition was won instead by Anna Hyatt Huntington, another great female sculptor of the period who deserves to be better known. Here you can see the full mural for the Never by Any Chance a Sculptress area, mural which integrates the interpretive area panel. Ernesto designed the mural so that the image of the winged victory from atop the Spirit of Liberty monument, which is shown at the right of the mural, could function as a photo op for visitors to the exhibit. So here you see yours truly demonstrating the photo op. Moving to the next area within the exhibit, we encounter the intrepid Mrs. Sally James Farnham, which points to Farnham's entrepreneurship and her philanthropic undertakings. As a single mother of three, the stakes were high for Farnham to make her career economically viable. She pursued a range of creative undertakings, even beyond sculpture, including set and costume design, and even designing women's shoes. She was also philanthropically minded and put her skills to use in support of a number of charitable fundraising efforts. The panel in this section features an image of one of the models for a planned Mary Pickford doll, which never made it to the production stage. Several artworks are featured in this area. Here we see in another panel-mounted vitrine, Spring in the Jungle, also known as The Courtship of Two Elephants from 1921. And a quote from Farnham is on an adjoining wall, quote, "Sculpture has fads like music. Right now, elephants are all the rage. Wherever you go in smart New York, you'll find numbers of tiny elephants. They're lots of fun to model." The quote suggests Farnham's attentiveness to the market. On display also is Farnham's 1923 bronze Rain. And Farnham gave a casting of this portrait of a Central Park mounted police officer to the Mounted Police Association, which made the sculpture their standard recognition gift, meaning that Farnham received income when the sculpture was cast for such a gift. Farnham was made an honorary member of the Mounted Police Association and was given a badge, which she wore on her frequent rides in Central Park. In this exhibit case, we see several examples of Farnham's medals, including a set of National Navy Club medals from 1923, which she designed gratis for a fundraiser for the National Navy Club to offer activities for sailors when they came to port in New York. Then president of the National Navy Club, Franklin D. Roosevelt, wrote, quote, "The medal is done in bronze by Sally James Farnham, the sculptress who patriotically gave her services for the production of the original of this model. And as a work of art, it is a valuable souvenir of the cause." Here we see also Farnham's John Drew Medal. In 1923, Farnham was commissioned to create a gold plaque celebrating 50 years of stage work by famed American actor John Drew. The plaque was presented to Drew at a gala event, and each of the 350 invited guests received one of these companion medals depicting Drew in the role of Petruchio. And a touchable feature of the exhibit is a bronze reproduction of Farnham's 1911 Pan American Gold Medal. The Fourth International Conference of American States voted unanimously to award Andrew Carnegie with a special medal recognizing his unique contribution to the Pan American cause. Farnham was commissioned to create the medal, the first among many medals she would create. The original gold medal, struck by Tiffany and Company, is on display at the Andrew Carnegie Birthplace Museum in Dunfermline, Scotland. So the 4 panels we just saw comprise the first room of the exhibit, from which we'll pass into the second room, which features 2 additional thematic exhibit areas, as well as an interactive kiosk. So the largest section of the exhibition in terms of number of artworks is dedicated to Farnham's work in portraiture, for which she was a highly desired artist. Farnham sculpted many famous figures of her day, but she also regularly created portraits of her friends and family, in addition to many sensitive renderings of families, children, and animals. Farnham's gorgeous 1920 bust of the distinguished American illustrator and portraitist, Nasa McMain, a close personal friend of Farnham, was selected as the image for this panel. Studio neighbors at 57 West 57th Street in New York City Farnham and McMain frequently worked together in capturing portraits, including those of Herbert Hoover, Warren Harding, Mary Pickford, Lynn Fontanne, and countless other friends. Here you see the full image of the plaster model of this portrait and an accompanying photo showing Farnham at work. On display here is Farnham's 1906 bronze bas-relief portrait of Theodore Roosevelt. Farnham was allowed to sit in on an informal cabinet meeting to sketch the president in profile, an experience she later described as one of the red letter days of my life. The sculpture was commissioned by social activist Jakub Ries for installation in the Henry Street Settlement House in New York City. As I mentioned earlier, Farnham was the first recorded donor to the new Remington Art Memorial, now the Frederic Remington Art Museum, when it opened in 1923. Giving the young museum her patented plaster casts of her portraits of President Warren G. Harding and Marshal Ferdinand Foch, seen here. And her family's carried on this tradition, as I mentioned. So the Theodore Roosevelt bas-relief that we just saw was given by her family, the wonderful Medill grandchildren, a number of works in this collection come from that family. Both of these sitters loved the portraits that Farnham created. Harding called his, quote, really the most nearly perfect of anything that has ever been done of me, end quote. And Farnham was commissioned by the American Legion to complete her portrait of Foch during the Marshal's visit to the US in 1921. Her friend Carl de Vidal Hunt, editor-in-chief of the Anglo-American Press Syndicates in Paris, shared a photo of the completed bust with Foch and told Farnham, quote, I wish you could have seen him studying the photo, that half-smiled surprise under the skin, just as you made him. In the center of the room is a long pedestal case in which are displayed 3 Farnham portraits, a famed British stage actor, Lynn Fontanne, the virtuoso violinist, Jascha Heifetz, and of Farnham's lawyer and dear friend, Enos Booth. Farnham's circle of friends and acquaintances reads like a who's who of the artistic and intellectual elite of her day. Writers, actors, dancers, critics, pundits, and visual artists passed in and out of the studio spaces at 57 West 57th Street, where the studio of Farnham's close friend, Nasa McMain, served as a sort of salon for the Algonquin Round Table. So here we have Farnham's portraits of Heifetz and Fontanne. And the Fontanne portrait is one of at least 3 that Farnham modeled of her friend. Here we see Farnham's portrait of Enos Booth. And in the crook of Booth's arm, you can just make out Farnham's cat curled up. Farnham had a regular menagerie of pets in her studio apartment, including dogs, a cat, a parrot, and a monkey. And the final section of the exhibit, entitled An American Sympathy, presents Farnham's engagement with Pan-American themes. The image selected for the large mural and panel is a photo taken of Farnham with the model for what is probably her most well-known work, her 1921 monumental sculpture of Simón Bolívar, the great Venezuelan military and political leader who helped liberate much of the Americas from the Spanish Empire. And the winning of a major commission from the Venezuelan government to sculpt this monument for Central Park was probably Farnham's major career triumph. Her Bolivar was at the time the largest monument and the only male equestrian monument sculpted by a woman. She continued to produce important large-scale monuments and memorials throughout the 1920s and was still obtaining commissions into the 1940s when she was in her 70s. And Ernesto, I know you wanted to say something about the murals.
Sure. Maybe you should just change to the next one. Is there another one? the real thing. So yeah, this kind of better illustrates how we blended the primary panels with the murals themselves. So you know, like earlier, this is an example of how we really wanted to not only integrate the image as one, but it was a good way for us to kind of create less clutter. You know, having too many pieces within such a small space would have been just a little bit too chaotic. So we thought that this was a really interesting solution, and it also added dimensionality to the mural.
I'm going to mention also that Ernesto asked me about what the final dimensions of the Bolivar monument were so that he could make the image of the model actual size of the monument. So that's a really fun feature of this mural as well.
Yes, well, thank goodness it fit.
Yes.
Wasn't just an eyeball of the horse.
Right.
I know, it's amazing that it did, really.
Yeah. I almost forgot about that.
Yeah.
So here we see the panel for on this area, the area panel. Farnham did extensive historical and cultural research for her Pan-American works, examining museum and archival collections and corresponding with representatives of South and Central American governments about the work she was creating. In a letter to John Barrett, then Director General of the Pan-American Union, Farnham wrote, "The general ignorance of the American public on the subject of Latin America, past and present, is appalling. I trust my panels will in a small degree add to their enlightening." Her work on the Frieze of the Discoverers panels in the Pan-American Union building in Washington, D.C. earned her subsequent commissions from the governments of Brazil, Bolivia, Peru, and Venezuela. Here you can see the related photos featured on the panel. I never get over just how massive the Bolivar model is when Farnham stands beside it. "This is the greatest day of my life," remarked Farnham at the unveiling of the monument in Central Park. And it was a major achievement. She had bested 15 to 20 other well-known sculptors in the 1916 global competition for the commission, and worked tirelessly for 4 years on the sculpture. She told an interviewer in 1919, "This past year, I've worn out 3 pairs of overalls in my studio work," a quote that we've reproduced on the mural of this portion of the exhibit, just to show that again. Also on display here are a pamphlet detailing the Frieze of the Discoverers panel Farnham created for the boardroom of the Pan American, now Organization of American States building in Washington, D.C., as well as 2 Pan American medals, one commemorating the dedication of the Simón Bolivar Monument, and another the Second Pan American Scientific Congress Medal of 1916. So we had surmoulage casts made of the obverse sides of the medals so that visitors could touch the bronze surfaces. Another lovely detail of the exhibit design is the use of photographic scrims in the 3 windows of the exhibition. So Ernesto, I know you wanted to say something about that as well.
Really, you know, the only thing that I wanted to say was, you know, Jakub and I really wanted to make an effort to use every inch of this small space. So we thought that this was a good solution instead of just having, you know, shades to really protect the artifacts from the UV rays coming from the sun. We thought maybe let's just go ahead and create these scrims. And I, you know, I love these because they really do show Sally's lifestyle in different stages.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely adds to the content of the overall exhibit. So such a nice human element to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Like more or less every possible inch of the space is designed without it feeling cluttered at all. It's really quite amazing how much content got included in this exhibit, which as a curator,
Yeah,
I love.
content.
Right. So I mentioned that this exhibit presents the world's largest public collection of Farnham's work, but it barely scratches the surface of her entire body of work, which runs well over 100 known artworks. And it can present only a small glimpse into the life and career of this important sculptor. So we knew that we wanted to tell much more of her story, and so developed an interactive kiosk that allows visitors to explore in greater depth the larger story of Farnham's life and fuller range of her known works. So each of the nodes on the screen connects to a collection of images and texts. So I just want to make a big shout out to the team at Trivium Interactive, whose design fits really beautifully with the exhibit and accomplishes our goals of providing deeper engagement with the life, career, and art of James Farnham. And above the kiosk is the epitaph from Farnham's grave marker, "A merry heart goes all the day." And Farnham died in 1943 at the age of 73. And I guess that one thing I'll make a shout out. I've been doing a 9-part webinar series on Farnham, and those take place on the last Tuesday of every month, and they're free and open to the public. So if you're interested in learning more about Farnham, diving more into her life and career, head on over to our website, fredericremington.org, and you can sign up. And we have recordings of the previous installments of that too. So unless Jakub and Ernesto want to add anything else, I think we've got time for questions and discussions.
Sure. I mean, go ahead, Jakub.
Yeah, I just forgot to mention one thing, that the fabricator of the exhibits were Hadley exhibits from Buffalo. Buffalo. Yeah.
Right, they did a great job. And
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I think I just need to give Laura a shout out as far as, what a great client she is. I mean, she was such a joy to work with. We laughed a lot, which is great. Not a lot of angst and crying. So it's always a good thing. So thank you, Laura, for that tour. And I thoroughly enjoyed working on this project for sure.
Well, right back at you. You guys were a dream to work with all along. And we just, like I said, we couldn't be happier with the exhibit itself. It does, it really spotlights the artwork in just the way that we want it to, and visitors are loving it. So
glad to hear.
Glad to hear. Well, thanks, Laura, for that beautiful tour. Glad to see everything's holding up nicely. So really, not a lot of questions, but there was one question that Scarlett had about the ugliest sin quote. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, so the that's a little bit of Fred's humor, Frederic Remington's humor. So the story is that Farnham brought a Spanish dancer to him for his critique when she had completed it, when she really felt like, all right, now I got to figure out if I really am a sculptor or not. I've been working on this. And he that was what he is reported by Farnham to have said, that she's as ugly as sin and full of ginger. Keep it up. That he liked the spirit of her artwork. But in terms of the, I'm reading your question, and the exhibit does address sexism, and I think that's part of the story that this exhibit is telling, that Farnham herself, along with a whole cohort of really incredible women sculptors in this period, were really breaking boundaries in the field, like within the arts, that sculpture has always been like the most masculine in the plastic arts. And, the press that sort of surrounded Farnham, is always like really concerned to show like that even though she's beating the boys in the competitions for these big commissions, like she's also this amazing mother, you know, and you see these great images of her, you know, sort of like, you know, she's got her cigarette in hand and a grandchild dawdled over the knee and, you know, working on a sculpture. And, you know, I think we very much are interested in helping visitors to reflect on, you know, the realities of being a career woman in that period, which hasn't changed all that much. I mean, I think that some of those images could stand in for, especially for, you know, the COVID times of people trying to balance their careers and domestic lives, because, you know, Farnham was working in a studio apartment, you know, her family was there. And you know, a lot of the press is, you know, like intrigued by her, you know, her horsemanship and like that she's doing all of these masculine kinds of works, and yet she's gorgeous, right? They always happen to mention like how beautiful she is. Like, yes, she's really that beautiful, red hair and blue eyes, you know. They're fascinated with the fact that she can do it all, basically. So the interpretive kiosk definitely affords more opportunity, even than the panels do, to explore those issues in Farnham's life and career.
Right. There is a question by Julia Bloom. Did the bronze of Farnham's artwork inspire the colors of the exhibit? Do you want to take that, Jakub, or do you want me?
Well, it was sort of a collab. Am I on mute or not? No. Okay.
No,
Yeah, I think we, you know, in the early stages, we talked about, you know, potential colors with, you know, both auras, and yeah, it was certainly inspired by the bronze sculptures. And there was other inspiration other than sort of the bronzy colors, yellowish browns.
Yeah.
In the first room, it was more reddish, orangey. I don't recall where those came from, but I know it was all sort of coming from the background.
Right, and really those, I think we tried to make an effort of making the space a little bit more vibrant, and we also wanted the colors to really complement that bronze color, but without really imitating, you know, the actual bronze color itself. So there's another question from we don't know who, anonymous. I've got to ask the question about budget and cost. For small museums, how feasible is an exhibit of this amazing quality and caliber?
It's a great question. I mean, we would never have been able to do it without a really big gift that made it possible. And we basically blew the whole wad of cash on the exhibit. So, you know, I think that's a great question, but, you know, I guess I would say when you're considering an exhibit, budget a lot and go for the gusto when you're looking for funding, whether it's grants funding or from private donors. Like really a lot. I feel like it is completely worth it, all the money that we spent on the exhibit, and I'm so pleased with the results, and I'm glad that we didn't go cheaper. Like the quality of the materials and of the design really shines through, and it elevates the exhibits in our museum in just the way that we wanted. So for us, it's completely worth it, and I would say build that into plans, and it took us a long time. I think if you recall the story of the exhibit that I told, it was a long time before the initial idea for the exhibit and its realization, and that was really about finding the funding, and we eventually did.
Yeah, and don't forget designer fees too.
All right.
Okay, so another question from Nancy Noble. Can you give us a timeline? When did you begin working on the exhibition?
Well, we started, I guess, in fall of 2019, Jakub. We had our first meeting.
Yeah.
And it was installed in August and September of 2020.
Yeah. Almost a year.
Yep.
Or 9 months.
Okay, any more questions, anyone? If not, our timing is impeccable.
Yeah, how about that?
Yes, yes. How good was that? Great. Well, I just wanted, before I hand it over to Heather, I don't know if Heather has anything to say, but I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the tour and hope you, finally get to visit a museum in person. Yay for all of us, but definitely check out the Sally Farnham museum exhibit, I should say, at the Remington Art Museum. It's probably really worth the trip. So hopefully, Laura, I get to visit you soon.
I hope so. You've got to see it in person.
I know.
It does look gorgeous.
Thanks.
Thank you, and thanks, Ernesto, for bringing it into NEMA lunchtime.
Yeah. I really sort of, I love her work, and I thought I'd share it with everyone. So
Fantastic.
I thought this was a good
Well,
forum
thanks
to
for
do it.
helping to spread the gospel of Sally.
Anytime.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Sure.
Been a lot of fun.
Well, with that, I would like to say thank you to Laura, Jacob, and Ernesto for presenting today. It was nice to actually do a tour of a museum. It makes me my feet are itching right now to go travel. It's like I've been to all the Boston ones multiple times. I need to go further afield now that COVID's freeing up a little bit. And as Meg mentioned in the chat, if you are ever interested in presenting at a Lunch with NEMA or a future webinar, go ahead and contact Meg. We are looking for presenters for the rest of the year. And I hope to see everybody at and the Insider one. Meg, would you like to unmute yourself?
Sure thing. So just a reminder to everybody that while many of our programs, including conference, are still virtual, we are getting back to doing in-person programs. And if you would like to do a tour such as Laura just led for us, but in person, and you would like to host an insider event for your fellow museum professionals, please reach out and let me know. We are looking to book mostly this fall a bunch of small, safe, but in-person networking / insider content style events. So if you think your museum would like to host such a thing, please reach out to me. My email is in the chat. Thanks so much.
All right. I look forward to seeing everybody at a future NEMA event. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.